People looking to name their new company, product, or service have a monumental task ahead of them. They start with brainstorming names, move on to organizing and prioritizing, checking domain name availability, emailing registrants because inevitably all domain names are registered, negotiating, and most likely failing to do a deal and starting over at step one. Or you can go to a brandable marketplace that helps companies expedite that process. I have the leading marketplace on today's show. Stay tuned to learn how to use the website if you're an entrepreneur and how to sell your domains if you're an investor. I have 3 sponsor messages before we get into today's show. First, if you have a great domain name and nothing to show when people visit, you're missing out on potential advertising revenue, leads, and partnership opportunities. NicheWebsites.com can build you a site quickly with a price option to suit any need. But as their tagline says, they don't just build websites, they build businesses. NicheWebsites.com. Second, if you're buying or selling a domain name or portfolio and you want an estimate of its value, Estabat.com is the place to go. Just like you'd visit Zillow.com to get an estimate of a house value, Estabat.com provides key information about the most important statistics so you can make an informed decision based on data. Finally, whether you're buying, selling, brokering, or financing a domain name, you need an escrow company that's properly licensed, bonded, insured, and audited. That company is Escrow.com, and they've been doing it since 1999. Escrow.com. It's about trust. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger. I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name investor and entrepreneur directly from the experts. One of the most exciting and frustrating parts of starting a new company, product, or service is actually choosing the name because you're going to likely need a domain name to go with that brand. And as I mentioned in the introduction, they're all reserved. And if you reach out to a registrant, you're likely to receive a response ranging from an outrageously high-priced asking price all the way down to no response at all. Luckily, a few brandable marketplaces exist to take away the frustration of trying to negotiate with sellers that have unrealistic or even unprofessional responses. Today, I'm joined by Margot Bushnaq, founder and CEO of Brandbucket.com, the leading marketplace of brandable domain names. Welcome, Margot.
Hi, thanks, Mike. Nice to be here.
I said in the introduction that Brandbucket was the leading marketplace because, quite frankly, I'm the most familiar with it, even though I've never purchased or sold a domain name on your marketplace. On your overview video on your website, I heard a statistic that since 2007, you've helped more than 1,000 startups find their brand. Is that statistic up to date?
Well, we're about 1,200 right now, so we've done some good business since we made the video.
That's awesome. And what's one or two of the most well-known brands purchased through Brandbucket.com?
Well, the one that we see all the time because it's in our industry is Envato. Are you familiar with them?
I am, yeah.
Network of, it's kind of like a brand bucket, but for digital asset creators, people who make WordPress themes and videos and music. And it's just a place where buyers of that type of service come and the sellers are there selling what they have.
Yeah, I almost think of it, and it's funny because I was trying to find some really great example that everybody's heard of. I'm not sure if anybody has heard of Envato, but I'm a customer of theirs. They're an Australian-based company, and I sort of like to think of them as like a Amazon.com of different marketplaces. You know, they bring a bunch of suppliers in, and then they provide the marketplace for those suppliers to sell their software. A couple of marketplaces I've used are ThemeForest.net and CodeCanyon.com. I've personally purchased software from them. And I never realized that Envato was something that they purchased. They had a bunch of different marketplaces that they developed over the years, and then they needed an overarching company, and they came to your marketplace to find that company brand.
Yeah, they've told us before that they wanted something that sounded nice but very generic and didn't really give an indication of what they were because they didn't know where they were growing to. And it was perfect. It's just nice and generic, and they can build their sub-brands under it.
Yeah, great. I had heard a rumor that LaunchRock.com was purchased through your site, but I couldn't find any information on that. Do you know if that's true or not?
No, not us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you wrote on your about page of brandbucket.com that before you launched your marketplace, you researched what makes a domain name brandable. Can you explain, the criteria that goes into a great brandable domain name like Envato?
That's the $1,000,000 question.
It is, and I want to start right off, so I suck people into this shell.
Well, typically the word brandable has been used to describe any name that it's kind of the opposite of an exact match keyword. It's names that when you land on it, you don't really know what you're going to get as a customer. It might give you somewhat of an indication. It might give you no indication like Envato, but they're the type of name that has been historically really hard to sell if you own it, because unless someone else thought of the exact sound that you came up with, or unless someone happened to think brown sparrow, that sounds nice together. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not selling sparrows, most likely, if you are. But I have a background in linguistics, and the whole thing started one summer after I quit my last job. I was just playing around, and I started buying this type of name. And someone came to me, and it was for the company I was founding with my husband. We had all these product ideas, and we said, let's just kind of build a repository of names that we can pick from. And he asked me flat out, like, why are you picking the names you're picking? And I had to really think about it, and I just kind of wrote together, and it still exists on our blog. It's like the 10 things that I look at when I'm looking at a name, from pronunciation to spelling to just kind of general uplifting feel, because it reminds you of some other word.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to link to that article on brandbucket.com that has the 10 factors, but basically it's opposite of a dictionary definition or what domain investors think of as keyword-rich domain names. They
typically have no type-in traffic or very little type-in traffic.
Right.
That's the key indicator for a brandable name.
And I noticed that on your website, one of the articles that you wrote was that one of the criteria needs to be non-trademarkable. So you want to make sure that it is a brand that, is uplifting, that can be spelled, that can be pronounced. So when you're doing the radio test, you don't mix things up. But it's also a brand that nobody else has trademarked in the past.
Well, it can have a trademark on it, but because these types of names don't really say exactly what you're doing, if what you plan to do with it is different than what the previous person did, you can also get a trademark. Mm-hmm. So its trademarks can be across various industries. But something like cars.com is very hard to trademark because you're most likely selling cars, and someone else might have trademarked cars for car selling, or no trademark officer is going to give you the trademark on the word cars.
Right. Okay, makes sense. All right, so I have a ton more specific questions to ask you about brandable domain names, and I have some examples that I want to throw out and get your thoughts on. But I want to go back in time and ask you for a little bit more information about the genesis of BrandBucket. You mentioned that you and your husband started collecting these domain names for use in your own business. That was around 2000, or you launched BrandBucket in 2007, I believe. So you were working on your own businesses prior to that?
Actually, that was in 2007. I left a larger company in January of that year, took a couple months off, and then in 2006, my husband had left previously. He started an incubator, and he was pulling me in slowly. He's like, I need help. Come on. We've got lots of products we need to build. And so with the names we were collecting, we don't really we're very web-centric, and we like... We don't like to open up a spreadsheet when we can. We like to see things visually. So we made BrandBucket for ourselves. He made logos for the 100 or so names that we had. And we never intended anyone else to stumble upon it. We made it so that we and the partners we were working with could go somewhere and look at the names that we had. But then, lo and behold, Google indexed it. People started coming and saying, you don't have a price on this. Can I buy it? We said, sure, okay. So we priced the names. We started to sell them, and that's how it was born. And
these names were most likely purchased for just reg fee, around $10 per domain name?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And when Google had indexed your website of these brands that had logos so that you could more easily look through the list and identify them, Was the domain name brandbucket.com at that time, or was it, another domain name?
No, it was Brand Bucket, and we that's what we called it. It was our bucket of brands.
So how did you pick? One of the things that I like to ask entrepreneurs that come on here is how they pick their domain name. When I interviewed Stephen Bold, CEO of coupons.com, it was clear he wanted the generic domain name so that he could show up at the top of search engines, so that when he bought advertising, it showed up as coupons.com. People know exactly what they're getting. With Brand Bucket, it could have been, you could have thought of brand locker, brand cash, brand, marketplace. Why did you choose Brand Bucket? Do you remember?
No, it was just it came from a conversation with one of our partners. We said, let's look in the bucket. And so it was actually called The Bucket internally in our office, but we went to go get a domain name to put it up so we could see it with The Bucket. It probably was taken, or something. So the double B sounded kind of nice. We're like, it's Brand Bucket. It's our little bucket of things that can become our brands.
Yeah. So that alliteration, the two B's, is a popular naming convention. So that was one of the thoughts that you had at that time?
Yep. Yeah. If we're going to name a company, we like to have it at least sound nice, even if we don't intend for anyone else to hear it at first.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So buyers and sellers are clearly necessary to make any marketplace successful. You could have a billion products like on Amazon.com, but if nobody actually goes to the website, all the suppliers are going to be disappointed, and of course you're not going to have a business because you won't be able to sell anything. On brandbucket.com, how do you bring both buyers and sellers together?
They're very different processes. The buyers has been historically hard because people usually find you through search, and now as we've been around a while, word of mouth is a huge push, a marketing tool for us. But we get the comment all the time when people come and buy a name. They say, "This is amazing. I wish I had found this 5 years ago." And we're disappointed because we were around 5 years ago. It's very hard for people to find us. They don't really know that something like this exists, and so it's becoming more commonplace, and I think as the number of companies grow, there's just been this huge boom, especially in the tech field, of new apps and new web applications. Just a new product is started every 5 minutes, it seems, and all these people are very tech savvy, and so I think it makes sense to them that I wish there was a company out there where I could choose a name, they Google it and they find it, and now they're not so surprised. They're like, okay, I had that idea, so now it makes sense.
Yeah. So are you mainly targeting tech companies that are starting up new products and services?
It's the majority of our buyers. Mm-hmm. They're the type of people who understand what a domain name is, how the transfer process works. They're just much more comfortable with the process of buying a name immediately, just putting their credit card in and getting a name.
Yeah.
With more brick and mortar type buyers, they do contact us because they find us, but there's a lot more walking them through the process and how it works and making them comfortable with it.
And does a brick and mortar type company that sells, I don't know, linens or candles or, books, would they actually find any domain names that might fit, that might give that feeling of what they sell in their store on brandbucket.com? Or is it completely, a different path because they're likely going to name it the city name plus an adjective or a noun, or they're going to, go with some other name that is more geographically focused?
Yeah, you do get a few. You get a few that actually are thinking longer term. They think outside their geographic area. They think they want something creative because the store down the street that sells seashells has a creative name, and they want one too.
Okay. So they can either brainstorm ideas and then contact the owners like I've mentioned in the introduction, or they can come to a Brand Bucket and then search by keyword or search by category and try and find what they're looking for.
Yep.
Okay. And so typical buyers are a lot of startups, a lot of tech companies. Do you have any additional information about your typical buyers, such as age ranges, product or services, or funding levels that they typically have when they come to a marketplace like yours?
We don't get too much information. The one thing I do know is it's probably about 70% male, but I guess in the tech industry, that's right about right. But ages, if we do connect afterwards, they're probably, I don't know, middle-aged. Younger people, I should say, I feel so old saying that. I think kind of like the kids right out of college, they don't know yet how much time it saves them to kind of come and just find a name and get it done and have the name today and not obsess about it for weeks and weeks. So I think that we get the more mature buyer, the person who has started more than one business already, and they understand that the name really, if it feels good to you and you can say it and you can share it with your colleagues, just go with it and save yourself the time, because your time is so valuable in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Time is money, but when you're younger and you have plenty of time, you will spend the time to do the brainstorming, to think about things for weeks, to look at other advertising, to try and pull it in. And I think it's part of the development process that a lot of entrepreneurs like to go through, and more mature entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs would rather just short circuit that process and go with a brand. So they can come to you. And the prices are set on Brand Bucket, so it's not like if they said they had $1 million to spend on a domain name and a brand, you would increase the price. The prices are already set.
Exactly. But you wonder sometimes, people, especially if they're familiar with domain name buying in the past, there's a level of trust that you have to build. And our trust level has actually, every year, it's getting a little better. We have so many of our purchases, probably about 85%, don't even negotiate, don't even inquire, they just buy. So that to us is a huge vote of confidence. Yeah. But the other 15%, they kind of feel you out. They're like, are you real people? Is this price for real? Am I going to get the name, or am I just going to get the name for a year? They just want to be reassured that you're not going to look up who they are. And they email from a generic address, so you can't look up that there's some big guy from Yahoo or something.
Right. It's interesting. Yeah. All right. So how many domain names are listed for sale on brandbucket.com today?
We just hit the 6,000 mark.
Wow. So 6,000. I remember reading some articles in the past, I think only about a year ago, that you were at 1,500 domain names.
Yep. Our goal for this year, this has been our strategy, where we're seeing the market go. And like I mentioned before, the influx of just new businesses, and especially in the tech field, that need names, we made the decision to increase the marketplace, to increase the numbers and really to service more people. There were a lot of people coming, liking the idea, signing up to our newsletter, because there wasn't quite anything that fit. Mm-hmm. So if we can expand the marketplace, and if we can make it very searchable and have people find what they need to find, which is something that we're putting a lot of work into, then we don't think there's any reason to stay small. There's a lot more people out there, and there's a lot of people that need names.
Right. So that's the key, right? Like with every single marketplace out there, if you only have 10 domain names, you can see them all on the homepage, and it's a snap. They either have what you want or they don't have what you want. But when you get into 6,000 and growing range, trying to uncover the gems that may, interest a potential buyer is the hard thing to do. So how do you make sure that you're being the most efficient possible? If there's a certain number of domain names that will make a buyer purchase, and if you give them too many choices, that it makes them uneasy. They can't decide between domain names because there's too many choices. How do you manage that too few, too many choices to give the user, the buyer, the best feeling about their experience?
That again is the $1 million question that we're working with. We're making search front and center, and we're putting a lot of work into the correlation of the names in the back end. So things that if you're looking at a particular name, what are names like this as far as style and as far as maybe underlying keyword? We also, our inquire button, we've kind of made it more prominent, and we're actually thinking about even making it more obvious that there is a team here behind the scenes to help you. And we get at least a couple people 2 out of every 5 people that inquire ask for help. They say, I like this one, but can you maybe suggest some others?
Oh, interesting. So they'll actually reach out to you and say, I like, the color purple, but I don't know if you have any other colors. I couldn't find any, or, something like that. And they want to talk to a real human being, almost like you're a broker.
Exactly. Yep.
And so you typically provide those type of, let's call it broker services or support to the customer, that it's something that a buyer should expect if they go to brandbucket.com?
Yeah, we do. And we appreciate when people get in contact with us. And it's funny, like going back to kind of your gut feeling on a good name, someone will come to us, say that they like a name, want some more suggestions, but more than half the time they end up going with the one they originally liked.
Right. So they feel like they need to do their due diligence and review enough of them. Now, what if they came to you, Margot, and said, I really like this domain name that you have on your website, but I was also thinking about this one, which isn't listed on your website. Will you go and try and negotiate a price for me and tell me what the price is?
We don't do that. We're busy enough as it is. Mm-hmm. So we try to focus on what we're good at. So we can give them some advice on how to work with that if it is owned by somebody else. But in the end, we just say, if you decide to go with your other option, we're here, it's here, and you'll be able to buy it.
Great. How many domain names would you estimate are submitted to you to brandbucket.com for review and potentially inclusion on your marketplace per week?
Per week, about 250 to 300.
Wow. And of those 250, 300 domain names that are submitted per week, how many are actually accepted?
That really varies. Up until this year, when we were keeping the marketplace very small, we were really, really strict, and our acceptance rate was about 8%. We've increased it. Probably on an average week, we take maybe 25% now, but we're seeing a trend of our current group, our current community of domain owners. They're learning what we like and what we don't like, and so weeks where we don't really get any new people coming in to submit, and it's just all of our regulars, we can get acceptance rates up to about 70%, because it's people, they don't even register something anymore if they don't think that we're going to like it.
Will you get some people that will send you names that aren't even registered yet just to see if you accept them, and then they'll go and register them? They
try. We've had to put a ban on that because that takes a lot of time. That's not our business. We're not a evaluator of names. So.
Gotcha. So you accept typically 1 of 4 domain names. Of the 3 that are rejected, are they typically keyword domain names? Are they, you can't understand them, you can't spell them in a radio test? What are they? All those reasons? Why do you typically reject 3 out of 4 of them?
All of those reasons. Either you can't really figure out how to say it. We'll be sitting here, a group of us, and we'll be looking at it, and we'll have 3 different pronunciation comes out. Or if there's even a moment of hesitation of looking at it, squinting at it, like, then that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
If it's a keyword name, if the market is just really, really too niche. So bluetropicalfish.com.
Yeah.
It's like, there's probably a buyer for that out there somewhere. There's some guy who specializes in blue tropical fish, and he will buy that name. It's not saying it's a bad name. It's just, we want to have a name that at least is open to the possibility of a couple different kinds of businesses, because therefore it increases the chances that it's going to sell.
Right. So if I came to you with blue.com, you'd like
blue.com?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If I came to you with tropical.com, you'd like that?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so words that people know how to spell, that they can pronounce, that can have multiple categories, products, services being used, are ones that you definitely like. So we've talked about criteria. Now, when people bring these domains to you, well, let me ask you this. What's the sales price range? What's typically the lowest price that you'll list a domain at on your marketplace, and what's the highest?
The lowest is right about $1,000. We're trying to keep in that $995 range. It's, for a lot of people, that's a no-brainer, especially the amount of time that they're saving and the And for us, it's not really worth it to us, especially the work it takes to go through escrow if it's any lower than that.
Right.
On the high range, the handful that we have that are above the 20,000 mark, they're really just the more really sought after, either very short or kind of keyword based. And we don't have too many of those, but our sweet spot is right in the $2,000 to $4,000 level. And that's where our average sale price sits anyway.
Okay, so your average sale price is still in the $2,000 to $4,000 range.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the point of the show where I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about real-world companies that have selected brands, because I feel like when I have an expert like you on talking about a specific topic, I want to try and ground the things that we've talked about in real-world applications so people can say, I see what Margot is saying now about that. So here's the first example. DomainSherpa.com has recently changed hosts. We're with a company called Linode, Linode. Have you ever heard of it before?
No, I haven't.
No, okay. So it's a medium-sized hosting company. I saw on Wikipedia they do somewhere around, $20, $30 million. So it's, a good-sized company. I say Linode. My CTO says Linode. So right off the bat, we can't pronounce the company's name the same way. Is that a bad brand when that happens? Or the fact that it's spelled the same way, it doesn't really matter if you pronounce it the same way?
It would get a ding from on my side. It would be on the cheaper side because of that ambiguity. If I were the owner of that brand, and I'm not sure they want to do this, but giving some history as to why you picked the name, like my guess is that they either started with or they all currently are Linux based. Mm-hmm. So if you tell people that you're Linux, then Linode would be my guess is how it's pronounced. But maybe they don't want to put out there that they're only Linux because they're planning on expanding, in which case maybe they shouldn't have chosen that brand.
Yeah, so they are Linux-based, and they're node-based, so that's where the Linode comes from. So you just helped me figure out what the correct pronunciation is. Thank you for that. So,
Sure.
So if I came to you with 3 domain names, linode.com, cloudhosting.com, and linuxnodehosting.com, which of those 3 would you accept under brand bucket?
Linode.
You would not accept cloudhosting.com?
No, not necessarily.
Because it's an exact match domain name. People are looking for hosting in the cloud.
Yeah, and it's a tough call because I would love to broker that sale. It's probably a very expensive name. But at the same time, it's not, if someone wanted cloudhosting.com, they would go find it themselves. And we have been and always will be there for the people who want to find the type of name that they may not have thought of by themselves.
Quick break from 3 sponsors of today's show. First, are you tired of being upsold and cross-sold when you buy or renew a domain? Then try the newest registrar being built from the ground up with a beautiful interface, competitive pricing, and 24/7 support. Uniregistry.com will surprise and delight you. The right domain can change your life. Uniregistry.com. Second, investing in Chinese domains is crazy hard without expert native language advice. Now, as a service to the Western domainer community, TLD Registry offers ChineseLandRush.com. Using ChineseLandRush.com will help you invest in Chinese domains with confidence and without knowing a word of Chinese. Finally, Media Options is a boutique domain brokerage firm that gets results. They've specialized in helping companies acquire and sell high-value domain names since 2005, with a client list ranging from funded startups to Fortune 500 corporations. Visit MediaOptions.com to learn more. Next example. Not many people remember Airbnb.com, a marketplace for booking accommodations. Started in August 2008 as AirBedAndBreakfast.com, an online portal for thrifty travelers that wanted, a place to crash on people's airbeds or sofas. Did you remember that, Margot? AirBedAndBreakfast.com?
I didn't know the history of it.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to know where the air came from. So it's the airbed?
Airbed, yeah, or people's couch. So is Airbnb.com a good brand and domain name for the company?
No, absolutely not. That's one of my pet peeves. When people ask me what a bad brand is, it's that one.
Why?
Because to me, air to me says air travel because they're a travel site. So it sounds like either they used to or they plan to provide airfare. They expanded way beyond bed and breakfasts.
Right.
It's people's apartment. I don't want to offer breakfast if I'm up on Airbnb, and it just all around. It's not. It doesn't say what they do.
Interesting. So if I go on to Brand Bucket right now, would I find a travel or accommodation category to search for a brand that satisfies this online accommodations marketplace?
Yeah, one of our categories is travel, and it's pretty filled out. We get a lot of names that we think would do well in the travel sector.
Awesome. All right, let me ask you another one. A slew of very popular websites launched with typographical errors. You know, we've all heard of Flickr missing the E, Reddit with red spells R-E-D-D instead of R-E-A-D, Tumblr missing the E, Fiverr with 2 R's, Dig with 2 G's, or products like Blu-ray that has blue spelled B-L-U instead of B-L-U-E, so it's missing the E. My wife particularly dislikes misspellings when they have anything to do with education, like Kids Corner, where corner is spelled with a K, right?
Yeah.
Are these good brands for companies, products, or services, or are they shooting themselves in the foot by using these types of misspellings?
I think they can be good brands. Our rule of thumb for misspellings like that, which you will see in Brand Bucket, is it really is best if the spelling can be explained in one sentence. So dig with 2 G's. But if you had to say dig with a Y and 2 G's, then it just gets way too confusing. The listener really has to stop and think about that. They're like, why? Okay, D-Y-G-G. But if you can explain it in a way, Tumblr with no E, then it can grow. It can last, I think. Because then when someone's typing it in, they just have that phrase in their mind. It becomes part of the tagline in a way.
So I've heard some domain investors talk about this and say that people can only remember 2 or 3 things. So, you know, they can remember Brand Bucket, but they can't remember the .com. But everybody uses .com, so it's a given. But if it were brandbucket.me, then they have to remember Brand Bucket and then it's a .me. Or if it were, you know, dig with 2 G's, then they remember it's a .com. Do you think that that's a fair way to think about things, that people want, you know, either just 2 things, like 2 syllables to remember, or is this the less the better?
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of psychology behind that. Your attention span is only so much. Your retention ability is only so big, and so if you're gonna have a name with 2 words or 2 syllables, then it's probably best to have the .com, unless the extension is part of the name, like about.me. Then it's about me, so it's easier to remember.
Yeah.
But I agree with that. Yeah.
So which is better, aboutme.com or about.me?
I would think that they're probably trying to get or have already gotten aboutme.com for those people that type that in, but just kind of being the next generation trendy site that they are, I think about.me works for them. It really is just who you are and the image you're trying to portray.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in that case, they could go for the .com, which is a generic about me, 3 syllables, or they can go with about.me. So basically it's a brand. They're going for that web 2.0 or that online and going with the .me, which is a little bit trendy, or has been trendy in the past, but then they want to make sure they cover their bases, so they get the .com.
Yep. Yeah, their audience, I think, is more just the very young entrepreneur who they're more accepting of the other extensions, the .me's and the .ios.
Yeah. So it seems like single word domain names are always the most desirable position for brandable domain names. Uber, the online demand ride company, started off as Uber Cab, for example, and CrowdTilt, the crowdfunding platform, rebranded as Tilt recently. I ran across another one called Handyman that just rebranded as Handy.com. What advice do you give to startups that are looking for a great brand, like, you know, these single word .coms, but they don't have the single word .com budgets yet?
I would say that there's always room to rebrand. I just got an email that Taxi Magic, an app I actually use, completely rebranded as Curb, which new name altogether. But again, they went for the single word .com. Don't overreach. I mean, unless you're funded and you can afford the .com, the single word .com, just get something that's similar, or get something with 2 words instead of 1, like all these examples you gave.
So if they wanted curb.com from the beginning, but they couldn't afford it, or the asking price was unreasonable or beyond the funding levels of the company, would you suggest going with a keyword generic domain name to start with to try and get search engine rankings and maybe a better cost per click on Google because people can clearly identify what it is? Or would you say, go for curb but add an adjective to it, like easycurb.com or something like that?
So what was the first part of the question? Something
would you recommend
more
going
generic?
With, if they want curb.com, let's say, would you recommend going with a generic keyword to start with, like, taxicompany.com or something generic that might show up better in search engine rankings?
No, I think again, it really is the type of company that you are. It's who you are as a culture and where you come from and your audience that you're speaking to. So I think if Curb is trying to speak to the 20s to 50 something people who are using Uber but who want to use taxis sometimes, having something a little more brandable and less keyword domain name is going to get you in the door with those people now, instead of, you might alienate them if you have something too generic.
Yeah.
But if you are looking at a very global, very wide age range audience, and that's who you are as a culture, then you would go for taxiride.com or something a little more generic.
Okay. Fred Wilson, a well-known venture capitalist and co-founder of Union Square Ventures, once provided some numbers from his personal portfolio, the Union Square Ventures portfolio, saying that 17 of 26 companies that he funded, quote, made complete transformations or partial transformations of their businesses. So they changed what the business focus was between when the investment was made and when they exited, maybe sold to another company or what have you. If 65% of funded startups by an established VC firm pivot, change directions, what recommendations do you have about how businesses and domain names should be selected?
That is actually one of the biggest pushing points that we have, is that if you go to the more invented type of name, you have no problem with pivoting whatsoever. If you try to get something, if you are in ads or analytics and you get something with ad or analytic in your name, even if it's brandable, even if it's from us, but then you move away from that, you're stuck and you either have to buy another name or you have to, like Airbnb, you have to continually explain why your name is different than what you actually do.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's spend a few minutes chatting about the nuts and bolts of selling brandable domain names on BrandBucket itself. How would an investor who may be watching this show go about having their domain names listed for sale on BrandBucket?
Well, there's always the signing up is very easy. You just come and sign up. We don't have any kind of acceptance process on who we work with.
Okay.
And we have probably 3,500 registered domain owners right now. So a lot of people that we're working with. And you can either right off the bat start and submit 10 to 20 names that you think would be a good fit and hear back from us. Or if you have a really, really large portfolio and would like more advice on, I think this name might fit, or why don't you just take a look and pick out a couple so I can get a general idea, we do that too. I personally do that.
So if I have 1,000 domain names, rather than me going through them, I would submit all 1,000 to you and say, Margot, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if you have, I'm not going to look at 100,000 maybe, but if you just have a small sampling, then I can give you a general idea of, like, you seem to be more keyword based, but this one might work and that one might work, just to save some time, because there's a lot of heartache really if you spend the time and you put all 1,000 of them in our submission form, which only takes 10 at a time, so that's a long time spent by you to enter them all, then only to get lots and lots of rejections. I'd rather kind of curb that from the beginning and just give you an idea of what you have that might work.
So is that on purpose that you only allow 10 per submission? Because you
Yeah.
want to create the process, have a little bit more of a hurdle so people don't submit 100,000 to you?
Yeah, we want people to go through our site and try to match what they have to what we sell. And it's much easier just to dump everything, but if you can try to look through your own and pick the first 10 or 20 that you think are a good fit, that saves everyone a lot of time.
Okay, and when I submit them, do I have to tell you, like, I think this would be a great Web 2.0 name, or I think that this is a good travel and accommodations category, or do I just submit them and you tell me what you think?
We do have a notes field. If it's especially helpful if it's a term that we're not familiar with, or if it means something in a different language, something that we might not catch right away, either on Google or just by looking at the name. But it's not necessary, really. Just the name speaks for itself most of the time.
Okay, and a lot of the Sherpas that I bring on the show on our discussions and reviews, they say if you have to explain a domain name, it's not a good domain name. Do you agree with that statement?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, so in the brandable space, sometimes it might be acceptable to explain a domain name, like Linode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's if it's invented, then there really is no explaining it. But if it's sort of a combination of terms like Linode, then sometimes explaining it helps people remember it.
Yeah. A majority of the domain names on BrandBucket appear to be .coms. I see a lot of startups today using .co, .io, top-level domains, but I don't see any .co and .io domain names on your marketplace. Do you not accept them and advise tech startups not to use them?
We actually just last week, we launched a portfolio of 240 .lys. So we do see, and the reason for that is because we've been watching the market. We keep a close ear to the ground on what people are using for startups, and it's much more acceptable now to use .co. .io is like hugely popular with the new startup crowd. .me we like, but we're going to really, for those extensions, we're going to limit our selection to kind of more premium versions of those.
Okay. So what would be a good example of a premium.io?
A dictionary word that already ends in io, and so the first part of the word would be left of the dot.
So a domain name hack, where you incorporate the extension into the word itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So you like domain name hacks on Brandable on BrandBucket?
Yeah.
Okay.
And with .me, anything that's a verb .me obviously would make sense as kind of saying it out loud on the radio as a test. If it works.
Like date.me or even about.me.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right, and have you had much success in selling .lys or .ios or .me's in the past on BrandBucket?
Well, we've only had them for a week, so
okay.
we've had some inquiries, but no sales yet. So.
Okay, so up until this point, it's been almost entirely .coms?
It has been entirely .com. There hasn't been anything else.
All right. Who sets the price on a domain name that's listed for sale? The owner or BrandBucket, or how is that done?
We learned over the years that people really preferred us to suggest the price that we think it would sell at, because in our vision is that the marketplace as a whole makes sense together. You don't want to have two names side by side that are relatively equal as far as pronunciation and spelling and have the prices be completely out of whack. So when you submit it to us, you submit it without price. We suggest a price back, and you're always allowed to contest it. If you really strongly believe that it's worth more, you can email us and we can talk about it. But in general, most people just they know that we sell names, that we sell them at the prices we suggest, and so they just take it as is. Our interface allows the domain owner to increase it, decrease it by 20% at any time.
To decrease
So if
it
you
or
want-
increase it? I'm sorry, Margot. We had a small little hiccup there on the video.
You can do both.
Okay.
So if you want to take our suggested and then start it high, you can bump it up by 20. But then if you want to try to clear it out, you can put it all the way down 20% lower than our suggested. But we like to keep things in a general range.
Got it. I see domain name deco.com listed for $75,000. Social.ly listed for $119,995. Thrivis.com is only at $2,515, and Noob, spelled N-U-U-B, is only at $1,560. I can't spell Deco, and that has a domain name, a price up at $75,000, where Noob, with 2 U's instead of 2 O's, might be easier to spell, and it's only at $1,560. How do you guys come up with pricing?
The Noob, actually my last company that I worked at was a security company that employed hackers, and the term noob is actually very derogatory. And so the type of company that would like that name or would want to use that name, like most likely it would be used for a blog, in my opinion, has a lot smaller budget, where we look at it as in decorate or art deco or decor. So that is a much larger market. And so both of those being 4 letters, they have a premium. Noob is probably a lot cheaper for a 4-letter than normal just because of the negative connotation. But then the not positive, not negative connotation of deco, but then just the much larger buyer pool makes it that high.
Got it. All right. And socially being social.ly is one of those domain name hacks that we chatted about. You recently started a partnership with the owner of a bunch of these .ly domain names like ask.ly, answer.ly, service.ly. I remember when bit.ly actually went down because I believe the Libyan government took down the whole domain name or something to that effect. Do you was that a consideration of yours when you decided to take on these 240.ly domain names, that they were a country code controlled by a country in the Middle East?
Yes, and we don't think it's a problem anymore. The owner of these domain names is actually the company behind register.ly. Ah. And the Libyan government got a lot of flack for what they did many, many years ago. And they've put in place now that they know this is a business, that people are being supported by this, and they can't really come in and do something that would affect people on a global scale. There's users outside of their borders that they're affecting when they do this.
Yeah. You state on one of your blog posts, Margot, that Pinterest is a great domain name. It's a combination of pin, like pinboard, and interest, like what interests you. What's a better name and why? Pinterest.com or Pinterests.com, the plural?
I've always felt that plural names they're not as good as a brand because it's stating what you do and not really what the company is. And it carries over to generic words as well. So sofas, if you're going to land on it, you're going to probably assume that you're going to buy a couch. But sofa is much more open. You could have an advertising company, like come sit on my sofa, or just something like you're not necessarily going to buy what you're landing on when it's a singular name.
Makes sense. So if Pinterest wasn't around today and I came to you with Pinterest.com and Pinterest.com and I said, hey, it's a place where you can, collect things that interest you. Maybe it's pictures, maybe it's articles, whatever. You would say I like the singular better because it's more of a brandable.
Yeah, exactly. And just the kind of anal linguistic side of me, the S at the end of a word is very hard to hear. It's a very soft sound. So you might get people not hearing it and mistaking it for the version without the S.
Yeah, good point. Domain name investors always look at their domain names and think that one could be $1 million business, but neglect to think about how much work will need to go into the business to make it that. And it's just not the domain name. On the flip side, I see businesses making 6 figures using terrible domain names, and I wish they'd spend, $10,000 or $25,000 to acquire a great domain name that's going to last them the length of their business. How do you advise your suppliers of domain names at your marketplace to have reasonable expectations, and then also advise customers that, like, hey, your business is going to be around more than just 1 year or 2 years. This is going to be an asset for your company. How do you try and bring everybody together in this middle playing field?
Well, with the domain owners, it does take some time sometimes, especially if you have a true belief that it's worth a certain number in your head, and we disagree. Our argument really is you probably paid $10 for this, maybe a couple hundred if you bought it aftermarket. No other business in the world has the kind of return on investment if you can buy something at 10 and sell it for 2,000. Nothing else. So to us, $2,000 in pocket now allows you to do so much more, get other names, and just really just move on with it. If I don't know, there is something to be said. There are some names that we have sat on for a long time that we truly believe are strong brands, and we get buyers coming in and we say no. And then everyone's allowed to do that. There's certain things that just tug on your own heartstrings that you don't want to let go of, and that's completely fine. But for the ones that really, if you want to make a business out of it, just come and list it for what, at least in our 7 years of experience, what we think it will sell at.
Okay.
And for the buyers, you mentioned that as well. It's again the argument of what's your time worth, and just how many hours does it take to find one that you can buy, and multiply that by what your hourly rate is, and there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So once a domain name is listed for sale on brandbucket.com and a buyer comes along, they click the buy now button because it's just acceptable to them at that price. What are the major steps that go through until that buyer owns that domain name?
It's a typical escrow process. The transfer can happen really quickly if where the domain is registered now and what the buyer wants to use is the same place. It's just a push to our escrow account and then a push over to the buyer. Then it takes the 5 to 7 days if it's moving registrars. But usually everyone's very responsive. The sellers get on it right away. They follow our instructions. The buyers are eager to hear kind of what the process is going to be. We tell them what it is, and then they respond to the emails when they need to.
So you actually do a full escrow process where you take the money and you take possession of the domain name and then move them across to each the buyer and the seller?
Yep.
Okay. And do you do the escrow yourself, or do you use a third-party escrow company like escrow.com?
We do the escrow ourselves.
Okay. So that makes sense. And then when somebody pays, say, $4,000 for a domain name, how much is the commission that Brand Bucket keeps, and how quickly is the seller of the domain name paid?
We keep 30%, and that's just a flat 30. That covers all of the credit card fees, everything, if it's moving into our account and we have to pay the 1 year registration, we don't ask for any extra for that. We're covering that. And the seller gets paid as soon as the domain has changed hands and we're sure that everything's all good and everything's looking correct. We do our payouts right now twice a week, so it's usually just whatever payout day is closest to you at that point. Sometimes it's the same day, sometimes it's a couple days away, but it's really fast.
And do I get it like ACH electronic, via wire, or via check? How does that work?
Right now we do PayPal, but we in a couple of weeks we're going to have a few more options.
Great. And I see every single domain name has a logo associated with it. Is that my responsibility as a seller to create the logo, or how does that work?
We have a community of logo designers. The marketplace is actually this really kind of funky, rich thing where we have 3 different groups of people working on it. We have the domain owners, the buyers, and the logo designers. And they're essentially working for no pay up front, just they're working on the hope that the name sells. And when the name sells, they get an award. So we kept it like that just to keep the quality of logos very consistent. We approve the logo designers based on their quality of work, and just we have very strict guidelines. They get a guide on what we're looking for, and they have to adhere to it just to keep everything looking the same and nice and browsable. You don't want too many crazy things going on when you're paging.
Right. So as a way to keep the brand bucket standards consistent and high, you control what designers get into the process. So if I'm submitting a domain name for lino.com, I can't submit my own logo for it, even though I might have a great idea and even though I might be a fabulous designer.
Yeah, unless if you can prove to us that you are a fabulous designer and you have a portfolio out there public, then we accept you as a designer on the platform. You can use your own. But in general, most people just kind of one-off their logo and they don't, it's not their job. Like we want people who design for a living.
Gotcha. And how much can I be awarded if I create a logo that sells with a domain name?
The awards are 100 to 500, and the domain owner is actually choosing which level they want to be awarded. And that price is added on to the price the buyer pays. But the higher awards are only offered to our best designers. So that's kind of a way for people to say, I want something maybe just a little bit better than the rest of the designs on the site, so I'm going to up my award level.
So I submit a domain name to you, you accept it, you come back to me and you say, Mike, I think it's worth $2,000. I say, fantastic, Margot, let's go with $2,000. And then I get to say, well, I want to pay $500 for as an award if the domain name sells to the logo designer. So then you actually list it for sale on your marketplace at $2,500. And when it sells, $500 goes to the designer. You keep 30% of the $2,000 and then PayPal me the rest.
And actually, when we suggested a $2,000 is the price that we think it'll sell at.
Okay.
So then you'll come on and you'll see 70% of that.
I'm sorry, we locked up just for a second there, Margot.
Minus like $100, which is the
I'm sorry, we locked up just for a second. So the $2,000 is the price that you think it can be sold at. So then how does your 30% commission and then the award get taken out of that number?
We have a little slider and I don't know, just like little fancy worksheet type thing inside of each domain, and you can see what your in pocket is, and then you can adjust the logo award and you see what the total price is.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So once I have the domain in there, it all becomes very clear to me how much I'm going to get from the sale.
Yeah. We want everyone to know the exact number they're getting, and that number does not deviate.
All right. And if I list a domain name for sale on your marketplace and then a week later I get contacted separately from somebody else that typed it in and came to my website and contacted me from Whois or something, and am I allowed to sell it, or is it an exclusive listing on Brand Bucket?
We ask for exclusivity. So we ask that if that does happen, and a lot of times people find the name on Brand Bucket because they are the kind of name that it's very rare that someone else is going to type in. And then they go to the Whois and they try to negotiate it lower. We have a large portfolio of names on the site, and that happens to us. So we know what's happening. But we appreciate the sellers who come back and forward the buyer to us. And if they want to negotiate a little bit, we can give a discount code for the shopping cart. But it's rare. Most people, once they find out that the buyer wants to sell through Brand Bucket, they just come and they buy, and they actually feel more secure that they're buying through an escrow agent at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if I go to other marketplaces that are typically website marketplaces, but they're selling domain names like Flippa or Free Market, I can pay extra to highlight my domain name on the homepage or in the search engine listings. Do you do any of those extras where you take an extra commission or charge an extra fee in order to highlight a certain domain name?
We don't. We did in the past, and there was no correlation really whatsoever that we could track that having something featured helped its sale. We sell things that have been on the site for 7 years, and you're just waiting for the right buyer to come along for this kind of name. So we've decided to it really does a disservice to the buyer to be pushing things in front of them that aren't relevant to them. So we want to make it completely open, have their search dictate what they see so they can find the right name.
Makes sense. And so if I do list a domain name on there, is there a minimum amount of time that I have to list it on there? Is there a point where I can say, Margot, it hasn't worked out, I want to pull it down, or I'm going to let the domain drop and I want to pull it down from the marketplace?
We ask for 30-day notice. So if you want to take it off, just give us 30 days to keep it listed. So usually if you're planning to let it expire, that 30 days works because you know ahead of time that it's going to be dropping.
Yep.
Otherwise, we don't like people to try it out for just a month and then leave, because a logo designer did do some work, and there's no chance that they're going to get paid if the name doesn't have a chance to sell. So just for that reason alone, we'd like people to give us a try for at least 6 months or so.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is the average age of sold domains on Brand Bucket?
As far as how old they are when they were first registered?
As far as how old they were from the time that they were listed on Brand Bucket to sale. Do you find that most domain names are 2 years old on your marketplace, or do you find that, stuff that comes on this week is selling at a higher rate than domains that have been on there for, say, 7 years?
It really varies. There's no average whatsoever. Just we see just from our own portfolio things, like I said, that we've had up from that very first listing of 150 names that were just for us. Something will just sell all of a sudden that has been up there that long. We've considered letting it expire. We're like, what the heck? Let's just keep it one more year. And the right buyer finally came along and they found it. But then there's other things that are great names and the seller wants to just clear it out and it's a great price. And in that case, something will go really fast right when it's listed.
Yeah. Do most buyers on brandbucket.com negotiate, use that little negotiate button on a domain name, or do they just pay the retail price?
We get over 90% retail price.
90% of people just click the buy now button.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, no. Sorry. I would say maybe 80% click the buy now without even ever talking to us.
Okay.
But then the other 20 that talk to us, we tell them our prices are what they are for a reason, and they say, okay, and then they buy.
How important is it to have a logo associated with a domain name?
To the buyer, I don't think it's that important at all. We get some people asking for the logo files after the sale, and most of them that do ask for it just use it temporarily until they kind of develop their own identity. But for us, that was the differentiator, and that has spawned 1,000 knockoff sites, just like Brand Bucket. There's so many of them now, but really before Brand Bucket, this didn't exist. The idea of visually pleasing way of looking at a set of domains. And that I have to give credit to my husband. He's the designer. And he's the one, even for our own internal meetings, just said, I don't want to look at a sheet. I want to look at something just nice. And so
yeah.
that was his doing.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I hate looking at my own portfolio. It's like, there's too many domains. And hey, in June 2013, a little bit over a year ago, you told Ron Jackson over at dnjournal.com that your revenue was on pace to hit $1 million by the year end. Did you hit $1 million in revenue in 2013?
We did.
Are you on pace to hit 1 million in 2014?
Yeah, we are. We're actually on pace to exceed last year.
Awesome. What number are you going to hit for 2014, do you anticipate?
Oh, I can't say that. A lot can happen in the last 3 months, but we're probably, I don't know, we're above last year. And I would say if we stay on track, we'll hit the million in sometime in November rather than sometime in December like we did last year.
Awesome. All right, we talked about a year ago you had 1,500 domain names. Today I saw 6,007 domain names listed. We talked about .io and .co domains, which are CCTLDs. I wanted to ask you about all the new GTLDs that are coming out. This week alone, there were 16 new GTLDs. GTLDs being general top-level domains like .country, .app, .website. Do you feel the process of naming companies will change over the next 5 to 10 years to incorporate more of these descriptive top-level domains?
I think it will. I think it's, if only because people insist on paying just reg fee for their new company name. Now there's a lot more options. Now a lot more people can actually just get a business name for a lot cheaper. There's always going to be, and what we believe and what we're banking on is that for the premium .coms, there's always going to be buyers for that. There's always going to be who what it started with. What, just like you said, you can only remember a couple of things. So if you want to remember something left of the dot, then it's best to have the .com. Yeah. But there are going to be a lot more of the GTLDs in use, and we're going to see people accept them more.
So would you consider listing a domain name like blue.app, or is that too narrow that only app developers are going to use a domain name like that?
I can't say at this time. Like we haven't seen enough of them in use to say what we are or we're not going to do. At this time, we're not going to accept those just because it does have a very specific niche. Mm-hmm. But you never know. I would have never guessed that .io would be the new extension of choice for young startups, but it is. You can't really say what's going to happen.
Yeah. On an interview you gave Raymond Hackney at tldinvestors.com in the past, you said that your buyers have usually moved beyond domain name hacks and misspellings and appreciate domain names that are spelled the way that they sound, so their customers don't have to think too much. You are listing .ly. I see on your website that you have domain names like fizzle.com, which is spelled PHZL. How do you reconcile the fact that, domain name hacks, misspellings, and, you're willing to consider these going forward, domain names like Fizzle?
There's lots of types of buyers out there. We do have a majority of our buyers who are more mature and who want something that, like Envato, that is exactly how it sounds. But then you get the people who they come and they say, that is really cool and that really speaks to me, the PHZL. I like that. And so we think that there's something to it. There's something about a name being memorable regardless of how it's spelled. Uh-huh. And so if it looks good to you and feels good to you and you want to go for it as your brand, and you're concerned with having a 4-letter name, which a lot of people are, I feel like they can get hung up on something short. To me, it's more important that something has fewer syllables than how it actually appears when you type it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so you are willing to consider some of those domain names that are brandable like that. I noticed in the footer on brandbucket.com that you have an affiliate program, and I know a lot of investors and domain name blogs are always looking for affiliate programs to earn extra income. They'll recommend, domain names that are selling on other marketplaces just to try and get a commission and earn some extra income on their blogs. How does your affiliate system work? Margot, are you still there?
It's through Commission Junction.
Okay.
So
I am. Okay, yeah, a little bit of a delay on the video.
Okay. So yeah, the affiliate program is through Commission Junction. So you sign up as a publisher to our program, we approve you, and then you get unique links and banners that you can use. And any person that's sent to our site, if they buy within 90 days, you get 15% of our commission.
15% of the 30% that you take in the commission.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. So for a domain name that's selling for $75,000, that could be a nice chunk of change. All right. We've got
sorry, you cut off too.
We got a little bit of a delay. I'm sorry about that, Margot. All right. I also saw on Raymond Hackney's website that in the past you had shared information about, at that time, the 680 domain name sales that had sold. Names ending in ZO, 18 names ending in LY, 17 names ending in IO, all the way down to, S was the most popular domain name letter to start. I didn't see any, and that was actually Raymond doing all the analysis from the domains that were listed. I don't see any information on your website about domain names that have sold since that point. Do you offer that information so people can make their own analysis?
At the time, we never actually published sale by sale what was happening. So the information that Raymond saw and that everyone else saw was just names that would go to the end of our list. So if you went to the last page, you'd see things with sold tags on them. And that could give people a pretty good idea of what was selling. but we still had a lot of people who would buy and ask us to remove their name immediately. So but I'd say what Raymond did was pretty accurate. Like not everyone asked for it to be removed immediately. We do get most people asking for it to be removed at some point or another because our search engine page is conflicting with their new company.
Right.
So we made the decision just based on the buyer and just to build more trust, which we think has worked, is to not show any sold names anymore on the site. It gets sold, it disappears. It's removed from the cache, it's removed from everywhere. And because of that, people are kind of speculating on what's selling. There's less visibility than before, but we're still toying with how to kind of give back that confidence that people, the pseudo confidence that people used to get seeing sold names. So
All right.
we're working on it. We don't want to make it public because our customers don't want it public, but we need to obfuscate it somehow. Just let people know what's going on. Yeah.
So, we talked a lot about brand, a lot about brandable domain names. Anybody that buys a domain name likely is going to have some sort of social media outreach. And a lot of times the social media handles, the usernames at Twitter or Facebook, let's say, or Pinterest, are available on domain names that are just made up words. What advice do you have for companies who can't get the matching social media usernames to match their brand that they purchased from Brand Bucket?
Well, in the case of where the handle is not being used, our experience, especially with Twitter, is it's pretty easy to get the handle transferred over to you. If you file for a trademark, can prove to Twitter that you did, you can get that. My experience with Facebook and Pinterest is less so, but I think it's roughly the same. But in general, I think not having the match doesn't hurt you that much. Okay, because these sites, their search is so robust. If someone just searches for Brand Bucket, they're going to come up with all the different options. If you link to it from your own site, to me, that's how a lot of people get to your Twitter page, is from your website. They click the little bird, they go over to Twitter. It doesn't really matter what your name is at that point.
Okay, so you don't think it matters as much, just like the logo that you're selling with the brand. Have you ever thought about selling social media handles along with the brand and domain name on brandbucket.com?
We get people asking if any of the owners have the handle, so we know it is important, but I think that's crossing the lines of the terms of use from Twitter and Facebook. I don't think you're allowed to advertise that you have them and that you're selling them. Yep. So no, we've considered it, but we're not going to do it.
All right. If you've spent the past hour with Margot, I recommend that you head over to brandbucket.com, take a look at the marketplace, give it a try, click through, put your cursor in the search box, and you'll see all the options, all the categories pop up. And there's a lot of fantastic domain names and a lot of people going over to Brand Bucket to look for their brand. So if you're a domain name investor, think about listing your domain names there. If you have any questions for Margot, please post them in the comments below this video on Domain Sherpa, and I'll ask Margot to come back and answer as many as she can. Margot, I assume that you have brands that match Brand Bucket on Twitter. Can people follow you there and see what's going on with Brand Bucket?
Yep. Yeah. Brand Bucket is our main Twitter handle, and we have a separate one for the feed of new names, so you can follow us on both.
Oh, great. All right. So go over to Brand Bucket and follow them on Twitter. Margot Bushnaq, founder and CEO of BrandBucket.com. Thank you for coming on the Domain Sherpa Show, educating us about what makes a brandable domain name valuable. And thanks for being a Domain Sherpa for others.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.